Welcome back to the Roundtable on the IH Sports Network. I'm Ben Garrett. He's Tim Smith. He's Rick Keaton. And it's time for what has become, I think it's probably safe to say, the most anticipated segment of our show. Sorry, Jason Terry. And that is our Black Cat Legend of the Game. And by the way, speaking of the Black Cat, their haunted house is open now every Friday night, every Saturday night on Main Street in Oneida, Scott County's biggest attraction this time of year. So if you need something to do, get out and see the folks at the Black Cat and tour their haunted house. It's well worth the price of admission. So our Black Cat Legend of the Game this week is Coach Keith Shannon. Of course, Coach Shannon started as his head coaching career at Sunbright and then spent a stint at Scott High. And before I turn this over to Rick, Keith, I'm gonna make a comparison that I know you're not gonna like, but I think as folks look back on Scott High football through the years, the two eras that are going to stand out in terms of wins, the first was under Coach Jack Diggs, and then the second was under Coach Keith Shannon.
Well, there was we were blessed with a lot of great coaches, administrators that really supported the program in those days, and still of course, but and then just players that were just coming out of the woodworks at that time. So we were very fortunate to be a part of that at that time. That's for sure.
Coach Shannon has spent 8 years as the helm, 2009-2010, set out 2011. He was still on the staff at Scott High School, and then 2012 to 2017. 8 years, that is the second longest tenure of a Highlander coach. Overall record of 41 wins, 48 losses. That's the second highest number of coaching victories. And I can go on if you want me to. 6 years that he had playoff teams, had 8 playoff games, had 4 winning seasons, and even a bowl win over North Green in there like that. So Coach Shannon started at Sunbright. Back in the days when you ran, what was it, a veer or
yeah. Now, I tell you, don't let me go off too long, because now talking football and offense and things like that, I'll ramble. So just kind of reel me back in.
To
that. When we started out at Sunbright, we were wishbone, double tight, single tight end, inside outside veer is where we started. I remember going to clinics with Tony DeMayo was the guy's name, who was really talking a lot of veer option at that time. And very quickly playing against the likes of Oneida and the fine defensive staffs that they had in those programs that is at that level, we very quickly realized that, those running backs that we've got there in the backfield, they're not going to block. So in order to continue to progress our offense in those days, how could we block them? And we knew we were getting zero man. So if we removed a running back from the box and put him at a wide receiver, that blocked, in essence, that DB. And so what we started doing is we started getting in a lot of spread formations, and then the inside-outside veer very quickly turned into some midline option. And whenever we started getting the midline game going, that's when we started getting some all-state quarterbacks, and really, really had some success there in 99 and 2000. So
you came to Scott High, and you joined the staff of Davey Gillum. I think you were the defensive coordinator for all 3 of the years that he was at Scott High.
I was. I actually was the defensive coordinator for Coach Sexton in 2002, 3, 4, 5. Then Coach Gillum, the first year that Coach Gillum was there in 06 as the head coach, I was just a position coach. Actually, Bill Hall was the defensive coordinator that year, and so what we ended up doing from that standpoint, is kind of went back in after that in 2007 as the D coordinator, and in 2007, 8, and then on.
The thing about the coaches that you mentioned there, I mentioned Coach Gillum, you mentioned Coach Sexton, offensive-minded guys.
Yes.
And I think during that period of time, it sort of helped change your offensive philosophy somewhat.
It did. Just very blessed to have been a part of those staffs. Coach Sexton's intensity was just phenomenal. So we really enjoyed that. Then whenever Coach Gillum came in, the offensive mindset that he had was so much different than anything that I ever had, and I began to understand that, knowing your opponent, whenever I'm scouting somebody from the defensive side of the football, what do they really want to do? Are they a run-first guy or are they a pass-first guy? And I always was a run-first guy with the veer option and the different formations. I was just trying to get in a position where I can run the football effectively. Well, whenever Coach Gillum is there, he's looking to pass. And that was the tip of the spear whenever we're talking 06, 07, 08, and whenever the high school football offenses really started to change in our area. That spread offense, playing basketball on grass is what we were talking to our kids about whenever we're recruiting our hallways at Scott High School. We're going to come out and we're going to play an exciting brand of football. We're going to spread it out and we're going to throw it everywhere. And really, but from the coaching standpoint, I'm sitting there thinking, gosh, they've got 7 in the box at Sunbright, or, early on, that's a run box, a 7 in the box. So Coach Gillum is like, oh, no. If it's anything, less than or more than 5, we're looking to throw it. And so the thing from an offensive line coach, which I say is an assistant offensive line coach under Coach Gillum there, I'm like, so you don't really want us to worry too much about blocking anything other than a 4-1 box. He said a 4-1 or a 3-2. He said everything else we're going to throw against. I'm like, I'm in. It makes the game so much simpler whenever you can do that and just control and dictate what's happening between those tackles with your throwing, your passing game.
It's an interesting scenario to go from where you were to get into that, and then you continued to follow that plan after Coach Gillum moved to Anderson County.
Yeah,
you stepped up to the head coaching position, and you continued to.
And again, Rick, you and H and all of the guys were there with us as we went through that. Again, just like I'd said whenever we started talking, I was so blessed from the players and the coaches that we had during the time at Scott High, and we've had some really great quarterbacks. And you name off the great quarterbacks that you've ever had in Scott High history. Some of the names that are very much at the top of that comes along. It's Jake Sexton and Billy
Started
Hall.
with William Christ and Jake Sexton.
William Christ and all of those guys. So whenever I take over in 09, we're sitting there with Jake Sexton. And then from an offensive coordinator standpoint, we've got Jackson Sharp on staff. And guys, I tell you what, there's some of the best offensive play callers that I've ever been around. Of course, Jackson Sharp fits into that. Bill Hall does as well. He can call an offensive game. And then the offensive coordinator down the road at Coalfield, Jason Wilson, who he and I had coached together at Sunbright. He was my running backs and DB coach in 90, 98, 99, and 2000. So all of those guys are just magnificent. But being blessed with that at Scott High in 09 and 10 and really all the way through our tenure there, I would have been very silly to have not kind of stayed with that mindset. It just fit our personnel better.
And as far as, with that time we've been in existence 40 years, start setting the all-time records. Wesley Smith, all-time leading rusher. Yeah. Jake Sexton became a 1,000-yard receiver his sophomore year.
Yes, he did.
While he was being groomed to be a quarterback his junior and senior year.
Yep.
And, you just funnel that in and realize the kind of talent that you had in those positions. And it takes more than just quarterback. We're talking about receivers like Nathan Griffith, who had 85 catches his senior year.
All of those guys are very special to the memories that I have of being able to work with them and things. One of the kids that was really a phenomenal athlete there in 2010, Daniel Smiley Goad, and that's it. Daniel Goad, whenever he came out his sophomore year, we knew he was a marvelous athlete, but we had groomed him to be that receiver opposite of Nathan. And, of course, Nathan is so special. He's out there making catches, and we're seeing the coverage roll Nathan's way, man under, zone over, those different kinds of things, being real physical with him on the line of scrimmage. And then Daniel's drawing single coverage. Well, Jackson Sharp knows what to do with that a lot of the times. And you've got a kid that when Jake Sexton turned the ball loose, you can hear it before you see it. I mean, he throws over your head in practice. It's just whoosh, through the air. So Jake would put it on them anywhere on the field, and that was a dynamic offense. And I think Jake Sexton that year, 30-some-odd touchdowns, 72 or 3% completion percentage, 2 interceptions in the entire season. And they were both in the first half against Southwestern Kentucky. One of them was a defensive pass interference, which was not called,
that
obviously.
Game was up there.
No, that one was down here. It's his senior year. And the second one would have been a 97-yard touchdown because we threw a screen out of our own end zone. And they had Southwestern as a big school, had some wonderful athletes, and they had a defensive tackle, it's about 6'4", 6'5", tips a football, intercepts it, and returns it for a touchdown.
I remember that.
So that was their only score.
And we talked about Smiley. I just mentioned that Jake had set the Highlander receiving record as a sophomore. Moves to quarterback as junior. Smiley steps up. That's his junior year also. Over 1,000 receiving yards. So he broke Jake's record. And then out of necessity, Smiley was moved to running back his senior season, rushed for over 1,000 yards. He's the only player in Highlander history that has caught more than 1,000 yards in a season and rushed for more than 1,000 yards in a season. And sometimes we forget about that and don't mention that. We think about Wesley with those 3,900 yards over 4 years, but we don't mention Smiley nearly as enough as we should.
Absolutely, and I'll tell you another one there. It's hats off to Tony Lambert. That year that we're talking about, whenever Daniel Goad was a senior, Tony was that guy that he was committed, and obviously graduating Jake, it changed the dimensions of the offense, and I was able to coach offensive line under Coach Lambert in 11. And you know, the great thing, whenever you have an offense like we had in 2010, early on in the season, you know, we've still got people that probably are thinking early on in 11 that at some point they're going to go back to their spread wide open principles and things. We went over to York Institute, I think, and that might have been our first win of the year over at York Institute in 2011. And I remember Andrew Starr, whose son went to school over at York Institute. He ran and caught me after the game. He said, here we are thinking all week that you're going to be throwing the ball all over the field at some point. He said, do you know how many passes you guys even attempted tonight? And I'm like, no, I really don't. He said, 2. I said, well, wow. I was amazed because, you know, the year before it was close to a 50-50 ratio. But in those games, and that was the right thing to do with that group of kids. You know, we had Matt Smithers and Big John Jones. You put them together on one side of the line and you give the ball to Daniel Goad running behind Isaac Blakely and Eric Blakely and the guys. And goodness gracious, Easton Burke, and it was a very formidable group at that point in time.
It certainly was, and that was the Coach Lambert style of offense.
Absolutely.
We've seen it there for the 1 year, and, of course, at Oneida they've seen that style. And Tim is referring now this year about Oneida now suddenly becoming a passing team under Coach May. Well, it's been that way for many years. I mean, it was run first, and then maybe throw if you're late in the game and you need points there like that. So it's great to hear those names and names that we forget so easily from year to year.
Absolutely. And, you know, talking about Coach May, he and I had coached against each other, obviously, whenever I was at Sunbright, and I've got a deep respect and admiration for Coach May, Coach Keith Henry, and Jim May, and, of course, Big Jim Birchfield. But I can tell you, in 99, Coach May and I was talking on the phone. We had played Powell Valley, which, of course, now is Cumberland Gap, early in the season. And we were a little bit – I can come up with a whole bunch of reasons that we didn't get the win, but ultimately we didn't get the win. And Oneida is playing them mid-season, and it's pivotal because now Powell Valley was it was that once-in-2 or 3 decade team that they had. And, you know, we had a little bit of success here and there, and Coach May called and was just kind of picking her brain a little. And I had a group of 7th graders, and I told him, I said, well, I've got a group of kids here in class. I said, but I can talk for a few minutes. And I think that we ended up spending probably 3 or 4 hours on the phone that day, you know, and But he is a true student of the game.
Right.
And I can tell you that Coach May, whatever it takes to win and be competitive, that's exactly what he will do, and they will always, always do it the right way.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's exactly right. Go ahead, Tim.
I just want to. I don't know if you know this or not, but we have something in common. Dwight Murphy goes around town telling everybody he discovered both of us. Did you know? I don't know if you knew that, but he takes credit for you being here, and I mean, it's like the Sunbright thing never happened with him because he can do that, right? But I definitely remember just I'd called games for years. At that point, it was 10 years probably, right? And hearing something's going on down in Sunbright, you didn't hear that very often. And it's hard at a single A school. You don't always have the athletes that, like you said, Powell Valley had that year.
Oh yeah.
Most of the time, that's what happens at a single A school. And so, I mean, I just remember we were all thinking, what is going on? It's just so unusual. And I guess I'm kind of sad that you're not continuing to contribute to the game in a bigger fashion. I understand moving on doing other things, but I mean, just such a talented ability. I mean, it's a loss to the game.
Well, I'll be honest. That looking back on it at Sunrise, it's such a special time down there. And again, I can't take credit for those athletes that were just naturally born into that area at that time. Just good fortune on my part. But I'll tell you, whenever we rolled in, and I started coaching there in the early 90s, and we had very minimal success at Sunbright. I think there was a winning season in 55. Then you get back to Doug Sharp's era in 79, 80. There's a couple winning seasons there. I was on one of the teams that was a 5-4 winning team in 88. And then it was just pretty much very, struggling times. And then we saw the athletes coming whenever I started coaching as an assistant coach under head coach Don Edwards in probably 90, 95, 96. We saw them coming. So in 97, whenever Coach Edwards became the principal and I got to be the offensive coordinator under Sammy Captain, well, things changed. With those athletes that we had 5 offensive linemen, and I kid you not, all of them would bench press 320, 30 pounds. We had a 240-pound all-state fullback, an all-state quarterback, and we rolled for a bit there. But and then we got better as coaches whenever we were finally able to put it together and really start competing with teams like Oneida in 99 and 2000, and teams like Greenback and Midway. And those teams were all on our schedule, and it wasn't lean times for them. We had just gotten to the point that we could compete with them. So, but yeah, it's great times.
Keith, let me ask you, some of the best teams, if you go back through history, some of Scott High's best teams, of course, one would be that, was it 79 or 80 when Bill Hall was a quarterback under Coach Jack Diggs, and they won 9 games. That would stand out. The 84 team, Tony Lambert was on that team. Then Coach Hall's 99 team, I think it was, with Scott Brummett at quarterback. But then some of your teams would rank right up there as well. But you're in a league with Fulton and
Austin East
back
Catholic.
in the day. Yeah. And then it goes to Alcoa and CAK, and you got them in there. And so every year, and I wasn't interviewing you week to week, that was Rick's job, but before the season, every year I would interview you, and we would look at the season ahead. And I would always ask you about having to play those teams, because it didn't matter how good your teams were.
Yeah.
You had those teams standing in your way, and realistically, Scott High was not going to win a region championship as long as those teams were in your path. But every single year, you refused to look at it negatively. I don't remember you ever one time not being optimistic, and you always insisted that your team was going to look at that as an opportunity.
Absolutely.
You said the lights shine brighter on those Friday nights when you're playing those teams than they do against anybody else. How hard is it to maintain that kind of a mentality against those teams?
Well, again, I go back to the days at Sunbright, because, we looked, whenever I was at Sunbright as a player and as a coach early, those are the same kinds of teams and names that we viewed Oneida as Coalfield, as Greenback, teams that had competed for championships at the district regional level, teams that had won state championships in Greenback. So we looked at it the same way. And I can remember people, always talking about, if you ever get the opportunity to do this or that. Then whenever we did, make it that jump and was able to do that, I guess it just, in my mind, at some point we were still going to get there. And we would have never known had we not had the opportunity right there in front of us every year. So I really looked forward to it. I never viewed it as a negative at all. I preferred to have it there, and still to this day, and Rick can tell you, it's pretty cool to turn on the TV and see, the Minnesota Viking free safety that played right out there at Scott High's field, or other players throughout the history of, the last 10 years in the league that has played right down there at Scott High, because, or against Scott High. We played a kid from Maplewood, James Stone, that ended up playing a little while for the Tampa Bay. And then obviously, other kids that have played there as well. So it's always cool to get to compete at that level against some of that talent.
To show you the level of that talent, prior to last year, 2021,
yes,
a team that was in the same district or region, whatever you call it,
yes,
every year had won 19 consecutive, had been to 19 consecutive state championship games, or had won the state championship game 19 straight years. Of course, Alcoa, the last, they had the last 4 or 5 of those in a row there. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And that goes all the way back, I think, Rick Carter's year as the head coach.
Yeah.
Austin East won the state championship, and then it went from there to Fulton's run. Mm-hmm. And the one year that I do recall that was kind of cool was in 2014. We actually thought we were going to have the 3A state champion, Alcoa, which held up their end of it, and the 4A state champion in the same region with Catholic. Okay. And our kids in 14, and Coach Steve Matthews, the head coach at Catholic over there, he had told me at the end of the year at the coaches interview, or coaches conference, when we got together and everything, he said that he commended our kids and our team on how competitive we were, because we had gotten down pretty significantly at the end of the first half. We had thrown a pick six on a screen pass. But then our kids came out in the second half and just played lights out in 14. And Coach Matthews said that night his kids quit. And he said they never recovered to the standard that they were before that. Mm-hmm. And he asked what we did, and I said it wasn't anything that we did at all. I said other than just instill the pride in our kids and the integrity that it takes to play the game with, because one of his kids, and I left it at that point with him, but to finish the story, one of his kids had looked at our sideline and kind of had done the throat slash like that at the end of the first half, and our kids got stirred up. And when they did, they came alive, and we really got after them in the second half. So
can I ask just 2 quick ones?
Make them long ones.
Part A and Part B. What do you miss most about coaching? And then Part B would be, what's the thing that you're so glad you never have to worry about again?
I guess the thing that I miss the most is just being around the kids and the coaches on a daily basis, and those relationships, because my best friends in the entire world has been amongst the coaching staffs that I've been a part of, and the people around the coaches that are close to our programs. As far as the things that I don't miss, I guess it's the anxiety that people don't understand what you carry with you whenever you are leading a football program. The sickest that I've ever been in my life to this point anyway is probably at 4 o'clock on a Friday before the game. Just worrying about things that you can't control, but it's just, I don't know. that's the anxiety that I carried with me, and it's just ridiculous looking back on it. But I know if I ever did it again, I'd probably be doing it the same way.
You know? Well, he didn't say media.
Yeah.
He could have said media.
No.
All right.
But Coach Shannon, pleasure to work with. Pleasure to know as a person, pleasure to have you as a friend.
Well, I appreciate that very much, and likewise. Enjoyed the time and the stories that we'll get to carry on with for years and years to come.
Indeed.
Let me add a part C to Tim's question, and this can be a yes or no one-word answer, because you're a young guy compared to a lot of these old geezers that are coaching around here. Ever again?
I don't know. I do know this. I enjoy the job that I've got right now. I enjoy working with Mr. Hall and the Scott County Board of Education. And, the thing that I have been able to find as I've moved from coaching into administration is there's scoreboards in any job that you're in. Whenever I was a principal down at Robbins Elementary, the scoreboard became the TN Ready test scores. And everything in football that we're striving for is to win that game, to have a winning record, to get those goals accomplished. As a principal, it was to improve those TN Ready test scores. And now as a CTE director, it is to grow our program, to get our graduates, our concentrators in our CTE program, more ready graduates and things like that. So it's just about identifying the scoreboard for us. So I don't know what the good Lord has in store for us, but I sure do enjoy the time that I had done it, but I'm enjoying what I'm doing right now very much as well.
All right, Keith Shannon, football coach, CTE director, principal, farmer, man of many talents, and tonight our Black Cat legend of the game. Coach Shannon, thank you for joining us.
Hey.
We'll take a break. When we come back, we will wrap things up with our final segment, which will include this week's featured cheerleaders when the roundtable continues.